One final tune-up before next week's U.S. Open, and it should be a fun one this week. It is the RBC Canadian Open at TPC Toronto. First time playing there. Rory McIlroy is in the field. Ludwig Oberg potentially in improving form. And also some of my favorites are, in my eyes at least, betting values for this week at FanDuel Sportsbook. We're going to dive in for today, break down my thoughts on TPC Toronto, letting you know what you need to know about this new course, my favorite bets at FanDuel Sportsbook, and the top DFS plays of this week as well. Welcome on into the Heat Check, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is JimSannes. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research. Flying solo once again for today. No Brandon Gadula. He's still out on vacation. Back with us next week, though, in good time for the U.S. Open. Should be a blast to have Brandon back on board for that again next week, but should have a fun one in tap for this week, breaking down all you got to know about this week's RBC Canadian Open, talking about the course and best bets and DFS picks for this week as well. We'll dive into all that here in just 1 second, but first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the Heat Check or the FanDuel Research podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. You can check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. Just search for FanDuel Research Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Hit subscribe, and if you like what you hear, give us a 5-star rating and review as well. Of course, you can watch the show over on Spotify, but also on YouTube, the FanDuel Golf Betting YouTube page, where you can find this show each and every week. 2 shows coming next week for the U.S. Open. So go there at the FanDuel Golf Betting YouTube page, turn on notifications, and leave us a thumbs up. We appreciate those of you watching on YouTube as always. FanDuel is the best place to find all your favorite player props, and now you can make the smarter play with new performance trends. Want to see if a guy's hitting that over consistently, or maybe they've been flirting with a triple-double? Get the latest stats right inside the app and see who is heating up. And once the game starts, that's when things get interesting. You can buy live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. If you don't already have FanDuel, it is not too late to get in on the action. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in DC. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. Visit M&D Gambling Help Org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Let's dig in now to the RBC Canadian Open breakdown. All you need to know for this week's event, it is at TPC Toronto at Osprey Valley, the North Course there. The first time they played this one on the PGA Tour. So no course history to go through for today, and no stats to dig into from previous events either, but still think there are some good takeaways from looking at the way this course is set up. It is a par 70 that is 7,389 yards, which is long for a par 70. This, again, is the first time this hosted a PGA Tour event. So, again, not a lot of data to dig from, but 156 golfers in the field, and the top 65 plus ties will make the cut after the first 2 rounds for this week. So mentioned before, it is a long course, 7,389 yards above average for a par 70, but it's also a wide course, wider fairways than you expect, which means the distance should matter a bit more this week than average. With that said, I do still want to skew towards overall stroking off the tee, because it's not as if it's like a super, super, super long course, just above average in that regard. And I kind of just want to value overall play more than anything else, given that it is a new course. And I don't really know necessarily, not all courses that are longer than average play towards bombers' hands. So to me, I think that if you're looking for a driving stat this week, it'll still be overall strokes off the tee. That'll be secondary, though, behind approach. Because if you look at the way this course is constructed, a lot of bunkers around the greens. So if you're going to go low and contend for a win this week, you're going to want guys who can put some darts on the greens, the guys with the best approach play. $6,500 greens. That's not small by any means, and you prefer to be a bit smaller if you were looking for just a pure approach play fest. But overall, I do still think things set up well for this to be a good event to target the ball strikers. And that's the way we tend to go most often on this show anyway, is skewing towards guys with good off the tee play, good approach play. I think it does set up well for this week, specifically based on the way TPC Toronto plays. Greens this week are bent grass greens. We'll see how that plays as well. Could be pretty moist, given that there's rain in the forecast in Toronto Wednesday night and again on Friday night as well. So bent grass greens, that should be pretty wet for this week. So to me, overall, this is a course where I want ball strikers. I want guys with good play off the tee, skewing a bit more towards distance and accuracy, given the length and the fairway widths, but overall do want off the tee play. And then guys with the best approach play are going to be the guys who stand out most to me overall every week, but also for this week. Again, no course history for this week because this is the first time they played this course. Let's dig in now to the current form section of the show. And if you're looking at the past 3 months over at Data Golf, as we typically do here, Rory McIlroy will stand out most. And that's not a surprise because McIlroy is obviously the betting favorite this week. He is plus 450. Ludwig Oberg is 14-1, followed by Corey Connors at 20, Shane Lowry 22, and then nobody else shorter than 28-1 to win this week. Rory, over the past 3 months of Data Golf, looking at their true strokes gain query, plus 2.44 strokes per round overall. That's a good number, but it's not where Scotty Scheffler was entering last week. If you remember during this segment last week, we talked about how Scotty was a full shot clear of the field in that 3 month span. He was a full shot clear for 6 months as well. Not quite there with Rory because he's at 2.44 versus Corey Connors at 2.09 and then Shane Lowry at 1.64 with nobody else above 1.12. So although Rory is pretty easily the standout guy this week and a guy I like a lot for DFS, I'm not going to get to him for betting this week, whereas we were able to get to Scotty Scheffler at plus 280 for last week's event. I think that this is a different setup. I think that McIlroy's form, some more questions given how questionable the driver was at the PGA Championship. I still think Rory will do well, which is why I like him a lot for DFS. I think he's also a bit undersalaried for DFS, but for betting, not quite going to get there for Rory because I do feel like there's some better options in that second tier of odds for this week. Looking at the golfers with lower DFS salaries who are in the best form as of right now, again, looking at the past 3 months of Data Golf, Matthew McCarty is actually number one on that list. $8,700 is his salary for this week. Did miss a cut at the Charles Schwab and the PGA Championship, his past 2 events, but before that, 15th at the CJ Cup, 14th at the Masters, and then top 20s at the Valspar, the Players. McCarty, I am not overly enticed by at 87, but is a guy who is in ascending form right now. A guy I do like is a 9,000 Ryohei Satsune, number 2 in terms of value plays and form the past 3 months. Salary for him, $9,000. We've talked about him a couple of times here on the show, and it's been okay overall. Satsune is not a satsune who's long off the tee, so if it does play towards the Bombers, that could be a downside for Satsune, but he's a good golfer elsewhere. Iron play for Satsune is good too. Solid putter. That allowed him to finish 6th at the Charles Schwab. He was 5th at the Valero, 4th at the Valspar. His lone recent missed cut was at the CJ Cup, and I believe that's since February, the lone missed cut for Satsune. So a value play I do like a lot for $9,000 this week. Davis Riley checks in at $10,000, number 3 in terms of values in recent form. He was horrible over the winter. Like, if you look at his Data Golf event log, it's pure red up until basically the Puerto Rico Open. He finished 6th there, and that is kind of carried over since then too. Riley kept the gains he got there in recent events, and obviously that culminated in a 2nd place finish at the PGA Championship. He is still having bad weeks with the irons, so I'm not there yet, especially with Riley's salary for $10,000. If he were more in the Satsune range, in the 9,000 range, then I could see it, but given the inconsistency with the irons, not sold on Davis Riley at $10,000 for this week. Matty Schmidt checks in next, $9,200 for him. He was cut at the CJ Cup, his most recent event, but before then, or cut a couple weeks ago at the CJ Cup, but 2nd at the Charles Schwab, 7th at Myrtle Beach, 9th at the Corrales Punta Cana. Even if you look at the events where Schmidt missed the cut, he did still have good iron play in those events, CJ Cup and at the Memorial last week. Schmidt is a good distance off the tee. not a standout to me relative to this tier, but again, $92, good form for him. Sam Ryder at 91, also entering in quality form, doing most of that via the putter, gaining a ton of strokes there. Does have some upside with the iron zone. You could do a lot worse in a profile of guy who gains on the greens and on approach, because those are kind of the two spike categories. But he's struggling around the green, and he's just overall super reliant on the putter. So not my favorite profile for 91 for Sam Ryder this week. Final guy I want to mention who is in solid form relative to his salary is Eric Cole at 93. Cole is a guy who is not great off the tee, but he's good enough elsewhere to make up for it. And I think that can work when he's a $9,300 in a non-elite field for this week. So Eric Cole is a guy I do like for this week. So Eric Cole in 93 and Ryo Hisatsune, a couple guys we'll talk about later on during the DFS section, because I do like their form. And I think their overall profile does stand out relative to their form for this week. Weather for this week, mentioned this earlier, it could rain overnight Wednesday to make things a bit moist on Thursday morning. So early Thursday crowd could have a bit of a leg up. May also rain Friday afternoon, when that same wave would be out there. Lower rain odds Friday afternoon than Wednesday overnight, but worth mentioning there. No winds to deal with this week, so not super concerned there. But overall, maybe a slight advantage for golfers with earlier tee times on Thursday, because they will get that soft course to kick things off early in that round. Let's take a look now at the betting odds of FanDuel Sportsbook and try to identify our favorite values for this week to win the RBC Canadian Open. If you've listened to this show for a while now, you know I've been on Shane Lowry quite a bit recently. He hasn't broken through just yet, but at 22-1 to win this week, I'm going to go back once again, because if we're going to prioritize guys who are good ball strikers and good with the irons, I kind of can't turn down Shane Lowry. He ranked second in the field and approach over the past 6 months, according to Data Golf, among those guys with at least 4 rounds of shot length data. And if you look at the overall for in the past 6 months, he is second behind just Rory McIlroy in total strokes gained. The question mark with Lowry will always be the putter, and the putter is not amazing right now. He's actually lost strokes in the greens 3 of his past 4 events. He's lost in 8 out of 13 events since January 1st, 8 out of 12. If you look, or 7 out of 12, if you look at him in the individual events. In the 5 events where Lowry did gain with the putter, though, his finishes have been 2nd, 7th, 42nd, 18th, and 2nd. So a couple runner-ups in that span. So basically what I'm hoping is that Lowry can keep the irons hot, can keep the off the tee play cooking, and just not give it all back on the greens. I don't need him to gain a ton with the putter. I just need him to not lose the way he has lost a lot there recently. And again, that number I cited, where he's number 2 in form the past 6 months behind McIlroy, includes the strokes he has at times lost on the greens. So to me, Shane Lowry in a field where not a lot of studs, basically just Rory, I think that grades out pretty well for Lowry at 22-1 for this week. So my favorite outright at FanDuel Sportsbook for the RBC Canadian Open will be Shane Lowry, 22-1 to win. Do think he has the upside to get this done for us this week. The other outright I do like this week is actually right behind Lowry, and that's going to be Taylor Pendrith at 28-1. I know hasn't always worked out great when I've gone towards Pendrith this year. We have had some highs, and the reason that Pendrith has struggled has been the short game. He has been hideous around the greens and bad putting, which is weird because over the summer last year, Pendrith's putter was actually a plus for him. Hasn't been that recently. But I do think we've seen at least some gains in the short game for Pendrith, probably the primary focus for him of late, and maybe that is starting to bear some fruit because Pendrith has actually gained strokes around the green in now 3 consecutive events. Given the way he was playing before that, I find that pretty interesting. He also did gain with the putter in 1 event, and in that event where he gained both in the green and around the green, finished 5th at the PGA Championship. So when you give solid, respectable, mediocre short game to a guy with ball striking as good as Pendrith's, good things will happen. He's been able to maintain the good ball striking despite probably, I'd assume, focusing most of his energy on trying to improve the short game because he gained 2.12 strokes per round in approach last week at the Memorial. Finished 12th there despite losing about 3.5 strokes on the greens in that event. So the poor putting could continue for Pendrith. I know that's a possibility. I know that he could regress around the green too. That's very much in play for him this week. But it's a guy with phenomenal ball striking, has the distance if it does play like a bomber's paradise, has the accuracy we want as well, and Canadian bump doesn't hurt either. So I do like Taylor Pendrith 28-1 to win this week as my second outright in addition to Shane Lowry at 22-1. Pendrith is not the lone Canadian I think is in play for this week. As we turn here to the non-outrights, I want to go towards Corey Connors up here in Canada once again. And I talked about liking Taylor Pendrith, and that might feel weird to be on Pendrith to win and then maybe not be as high on Corey Connors to win, given that Connors is also a good ball striker, but is not as treacherous around the greens. The reason that I think that Connors grades out well, specifically for a top 10 market, is because the consistency for him is really, really good. If you look at the 14 events that Connors has played since January 1st, he has 5 top 10s and 8 top 20s, including dead heats in there. He was just outside that at the Memorial last week, despite some really weird iron play for Connors. Typically, that's his strength. For whatever reason, he actually lost quite a few strokes with the approach, which is the first time he has done so since mid-February. Overall, Connors still ranks third in the field in true strokes gained the past 6 months, according to Data Golf, behind just Rory McIlroy and Shane Lowry. He has gained in all 4 strokes gained categories. He's 31st or better in everything except for around the green play, and that's not something I care as much about this week as I might in some other weeks. The one reason that I skew towards the top 10 for Connors instead of the outright is because, again, haven't seen the same spikiness in terms of generating upside with Connors as I have with Pendrith and with Lowry. So to me, that's why steadiness for Connors is both his superpower, but also potentially his kryptonite, which is why I want to go towards the top 10 market as opposed to betting him to win this week. Connors right now, plus 220 to finish top 10 at FanDuel Sportsbook. I think that makes a lot of sense given how good he is as a ball striker, the fact that putting has been pretty steady for Connors over a long sample now. And again, Canada bump does not hurt for him playing in his home national tournament. So we'll take Corey Connors for a top 10, plus 220 over at FanDuel Sportsbook for this week. The other non-outright that I like at FanDuel Sportsbook for the RBC Canadian Open will be a top 20. That's going to be on Keith Mitchell, a guy we talked about a couple of times here on the show the past couple of weeks. Has cooled off the past 2 events for him, one of those being the PGA Championship. That's pretty understandable, and I think that we're still getting value on Keith Mitchell at 2-1 to finish inside the top 20 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Mitchell is a guy who should play this course pretty well, given we're looking for ball strikers here. If you look at the past 6 months, Mitchell ranks 7th off the tee and 18th in approach, according to Data Golf, and it leads to his ranking 4th overall in true strokes gained the past 6 months, despite not having the best short game. We don't want to double count the bad short game for guys like Keith Mitchell, like Taylor Pendrith. If we look at overall stroke gained, that's already accounted for in that number, and Mitchell does grade out well there. Again, 4th the past 6 months behind guys with much shorter odds for him than for this week. I also think that Mitchell is probably a guy we want to target more so in these events, which are non-elite fields versus spots like the PGA Championship. I did like him at the PGA Championship, but I do feel like he's a better suited guy for this kind of event where he's not dealing with the same depth of contenders there, because his ball striking relative to the field is going to stand out even more in this group. Mitchell, runner-up at the Corrales Punta Cana, 12th at the Valero, 18th at the Texas Children's Houston Open. And he also was 7th at the Truist, which is a tougher event, or a tougher field at least. So I think we can justify Keith Mitchell here in a forgiving market, given that it's not the toughest field to win this week and the fact that he has played pretty well overall of late. So my favorite bets for this week at FanDuel Sportsbook: Keith Mitchell, top 20 at 2-1. I like Corey Connors for a top 10 at plus 220. We are on Taylor Pendrith to win at 28-1 and Shane Lowry at 22-1 to win this week. Let's finish up here with the DFS section of the show and dive into my top DFS plays on FanDuel for this week. This is a spot where if you want Rory McIlroy, I'd rather use him in DFS than from a betting perspective, because the salary for Rory is $1,300 or $13,000. That's fine. Talked about how we viewed Scheffler last week. $14,000. Still want him in every lineup. Not quite the same with McIlroy, but also I do think he's undersalaried. Could justify 13.5, I think, on McIlroy for this week. Distance could matter, which is an awesome thing for McIlroy, given how good he always is there. I think that he should be a bit closer in salary to where Scotty was last week at $14,000. Again, I can't bet McIlroy this week at plus 450 personally, but I do think that I can get exposure to him via DFS because he is still almost a full stroke clear of the field in true stroke in the past 6 months. Look at the past 3 months earlier on, which does include what he did at Augusta, but also some less thrilling events since then. So for DFS, do like McIlroy, $13,000 for this week. Lowry's salary is 11.9. That might be tough to get to when you're going with McIlroy at $13,000. But I do think it's worth at least trying to get Lowry in there because, again, the irons are really good right now. I do think he's solid relative to this tier. And I like him more than Connors, whose salary is 12.1, whereas Lowry's at 11.9. I like him a lot more than Ludwig Oberg as well at 12.5. So to me, in that second tier, it's Lowry. If you go with McIlroy plus Lowry, that leaves you with $87.75 left per golfer to fill 4 additional slots. I think there's a guy in the 7K range who could make that viable. So I do want to have that in lineups this week, potentially even in a, if I had like one single entry lineup, I might go with this lineup where it's Lowry plus McIlroy. But it is tough for sure to do that. With McIlroy, if you want to save a bit for that second slot and go down from Lowry, I would highlight Taylor Pendrith at 11.3. I prefer him for betting because I like his volatility quite a bit there. So prefer Pendrith for betting at 11.3. Keith Mitchell, $11,000, could be enticing in this range as well. Alex Noren, if you think that the form he has shown is interesting, I don't hate that at 10.4. It's still a small sample on him since he came back from that hamstring injury, but he's been solid in those 3 events, 51st, 17th, 39th. But overall, this is not my favorite range, which is part of why I prefer to get up to Lowry when I can, get up to Pendrith potentially when I can. I think that is the better play for me this week versus settling for someone in the 10K range or the low 11 range. I do like the build of going with Lowry plus McIlroy personally. Also does help that the upper 9K range is not amazing in my eyes this week. Honestly, not a lot of guys I feel like are truly super enticing. Don't hate Gary Woodland at 97. I think that could be an option we could go to. But the first guy the first section where I'm like, okay, I actively am okay with going with these guys is right in this range at $9,400 or 93. Alex Smalley, Ryan Fox, Eric Cole, all guys I could see myself using for this week. My favorite of that group is Alex Smalley at 94. Struggled with the irons at the Charles Schwab, but they were good again before that, where he's been a little bit up and down with the irons, but I think that we've seen him have enough positive events there where I can buy into it overall. Some distance, also some accuracy for Smalley. I think he can bounce back after one bad event. So I like Smalley a lot at 94. I'd go Ryan Fox number 2 in this range, behind Smalley and above Cole. Also 94. The irons for Fox have been really good for him recently. He ranks 14th in approach the past 6 months and 15th across the past 3 months. Even in the smaller sample, Fox has been good. Did have one implosion to Valero, but has generally been good outside of that. So I don't want to let one bad event push me off Ryan Fox at $9,400. Mentioned Eric Cole in the current form section. Salary is 93 for him. He's not a guy who will gain off the tee. He'll actually lose off the tee. I can almost guarantee it, but everything else from him is pretty good. I don't think he has the best upside by any means, but could be a solid play if you have a lot of volatility elsewhere in your lineup. Like if you have a Pendrith at 11.3, I think Cole makes more sense there because his floor is good given his approach through putting being as solid as it is. So in this mid-range, Smalley's number 1 for me at 94, followed by Fox 94, then Eric Cole at 93. But all those guys are guys I do like for this week. Mention Ryo Hisatsune as well in the current form section. His salary, $9,000, one of the better value plays for this week. Hisatsune, 6th at the Charles Schwab, 5th at the Valero, 4th at the Valspar. And he's doing that with good irons and good putting. The driver for him, not as good, but also not as bad as Eric Cole, because although he's not going to gain off the distance or gain accuracy, he still is more so neutral off the tee, whereas Cole loses. So Hisatsune to me, one of the guys more likely to be in my lineups this week. And if I had just one lineup, I can almost guarantee you Hisatsune will be in there with a salary of $9,000. A bit below him, we have Nikolai Højgaard, $8,900. Obviously a guy who's going to have a lot of giddy up off the tee. Really good ball striker relative to his salary. Just terrible around the green. And again, if it's a new course where I don't have like specific reason to think we're going to need to emphasize around the green play, I am okay downplaying that a bit, putting more emphasis on the ball striking categories of off the tee and approach. And those things will point me towards Nikolai Højgaard 89. He can putt at times. We just basically need him to not implode around the greens, and that could allow him to be okay enough for this week. So Højgaard, Nikolai specifically, 89 is a guy I am okay with for this week. Final guy I wanted to highlight is the one I mentioned if we're trying to jam in both Lowry and McIlroy. Max McGreevy comes in with a salary of $7,900, so a true value play for this week. Again, could get you extra flexibility if you're trying to get in both those guys. The putter from McGreevy has been awful, but it is still a small sample on him, and he had some positive events when he first came up from the Corn Ferry Tour. The tee to green play is still good, just a slight negative around the green. But the ball striking again from McGreevy is good. So I think for 79, you could do a lot worse. And I do like McGreevy for this week. So value plays, as far as like the guys I'm like good with, like really good with, can be McGreevy 79, Nikolai Højgaard at 89, Ryohei Satsune at $9,000. I would also highlight Lee Hodges at $8,500 is a guy I'm okay with. And then Henrik Norlander 82, both options if you're trying to go a bit more volatile with that McIlroy plus Lowry build. So my loves for DFS this week, McIlroy at 13,000. Really want to get to Lowry at 11.9 when I can. But then looking at that mid-range, those guys in the 94 range of Ryan Fox, Eric Cole, Alex Smalley, Ryohei Satsune, one of my favorite plays this week behind probably just McIlroy and Lowry. And then McGreevy and Nikolai Højgaard as guys who can save some salary with Lee Hodges and Henrik Norlander's other options to move the needle and trying to go high upside for this week. Again, no Brandon this week, so these will not officially account for our win picks contest. Kind of wish he had been here last week so I could get credit for the Scotty win, but that's how things go. And he'll be back with us again for next week. If I were doing win picks with Brandon this week, I would want to go with the two guys we discussed in the betting section, those being Shane Lowry 22, Taylor Pendrith at 28. Those guys have upside, volatile because of the putter for Lowry and because of the short game overall for Pendrith, but I think they have upside because of how good the ball striking is, and based on the way I think this course will play, those are the kind of golfers on the target for this week. So win picks for me, again, not officially counting towards our contest, but just for funsies, we'll go with Shane Lowry 22 and Taylor Pendrith at 28. That's all that we have here for today on the Heat Check. But again, Brandon back with us once again next week. If you want some more thoughts on the RBC Canadian Open, we can check out my betting guide over at FanDuel.com/research, but also Austin Swaim doing a DFS helper for us as well for this week for the RBC Canadian Open. Check that out over at FanDuel.com/research to get your lineup set for this week. Don't forget to subscribe to the FanDuel Research podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts, but also the FanDuel Golf Betting YouTube page. And again, leave us a thumbs up if you're watching. We appreciate those of you on the YouTube side of things as always. Big thank you to our YouTube producer, Justin Lane, for his work on the video side of things. Thank you, Justin, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your bets and your DFS lineups for the RBC Canadian Open. We'll talk to you once again next week for the US Open. This has been the Heat Check, a FanDuel Research podcast.